All right, started.
All right, we are live, and I'm hosting on somebody else's channel. I'm Jeremy Clemens, and this is the Reserve Squad imported to another medium here, and I'm joined with the host of this channel, Ben Merritt. How are you doing, Ben?
Yeah, I'm doing all right now. Yesterday wasn't as much fun, but yeah, still
Yeah,
alive and kicking. So
yeah, still alive and kicking, and I'm glad to see. I don't know if you saw today. We maybe get on this later, but Liverpool had like a parade of sorts, which I thought was nice. Like I
yeah,
get I think some people were kind of trolling, like, "Hey, like participation trophies or whatever." But it was good. I thought it was nice for the fans and for a team that played so many every possible game this season. I thought it was nice for see the players who were really upset yesterday actually smiling and soaking in the season because it was a great season.
and with the news today that Mane might officially be out the door. It's possible the last time all of them will basically be or the front three, Salah, Mane, and Firmino will all be together. So it was nice to get a couple pictures. And one thing that was really cool is they also celebrated with the women's team, I believe, who because they won, I guess, in the lower division, they won promotion for the Women's Super League next year. So yeah, I guess
That's awesome.
it's good. It's good for vibes. Good to see like Klopp smiling again, and there are a couple pictures taken like from bad angles. People like making fun of like no one being there, but I saw other angles where there was a pretty good crowd, all things considered. So good to have some vibes at least after yesterday, because it wasn't just the game, like the or it wasn't just a bad day for the players. A lot of the fans went through some hell, which I guess we'll get into.
Yeah, well, maybe we should start with that because the build up to these games, it's always a long day. I mean, whether you're attending or even, I guess, even a casual viewer, you could tune in at 1 o'clock and the game's at 3 o'clock. Talk about Eastern time,
Yep.
but I was sitting down getting ready around 2:30, and I started hearing some things trickle through. I think you were texting the group, and then you started seeing some things being reported. Actually, the thing that first came up was actually, I think it was Thierry Henry and Carragher talking about the fans, looking at the sides of the stadium, and I think Henry just kept referencing. He's just like, "Where are the Liverpool fans here? Like, what's going on?" And it felt like this really slow moving tragedy because it started off kind of innocuous, and then you hear these reports that well, you don't know what to think. I mean, you hear these reports that there are people jumping the gates. You hear there might be some problems outside the grounds, but you don't really know whose fault it is.
Hmm.
Maybe we can just talk about that kind of eeriness right there, especially surrounding, I guess, the fact that it's the one team and club in England, maybe in Europe, that just has a history of concerning things with fans, and you get. I mean, I don't know. I kind of got triggered a little bit thinking about that. How did you feel maybe early on when this was starting to take place?
Yeah, so I mean, I had spent basically all morning or slash afternoon, kind of messing around at the driving range. So I didn't get back till like maybe 2:30, maybe not even 2:45. And then I went to go shower, and then Andrew came down and basically said there's like a riot outside. Because the way like CBS was reporting, and they didn't really know. But he was like, yeah, something like tear gas was used, and I figured it was maybe a security event scene. Um, but yeah, as more and more news kind of came out, and because everyone has phones these days, everybody kind of documented themselves and put it on Twitter or
Good point.
social media. People were able to see what was actually happening, and it's like there was tear gas used, but it wasn't because of like some kind of attack. Just cops or whatever were using it against just actual fans, and we found out that it was it was done where kids were nearby. There have been some awful reports about that. Joel Matip has a brother, and he was with his wife, who's pregnant, and apparently there was enough gas in the area for them. They had to leave, and all of this was apparently. I still don't, we still don't actually know what the cause of this was, but the gist of it is they weren't allowing they weren't allowing fans into the stadium, and they basically they closed everything off to like one gate. And so when you talk about the history of what's happened to their club, you're referring to that Hillsborough incident
Yeah,
where there was kind of a similar thing where they tried to pack fans into like a tiny little area, and it wasn't guarded properly. And another thing that's kind of traumatizing is like with Hillsborough, they've spent 30 years where either the UK government or uh, or I guess like the media basically blamed Liverpool fans for what happened in Hillsborough, and that almost happened. You almost saw like the same thing happening yesterday. They were blaming the fans for like being late for why this was
Yeah,
happening.
I was on that, Ben, because that was well, Henri. I think that was and to give him, like, to be fair to him, I think on air, he's just
It's
he
in the
didn't really
moment.
know
Yeah, you don't know.
severity. He was probably just thinking, why are you guys showing up late? I actually had a mutual friend of ours reach out, and I don't want to name him on air, but he was telling me that this is typical of Liverpool fans. They want to do a very late walk up,
Hmm.
but I was reading this morning. Our friend Ben Jones sent me an article. I think I might have sent it to you in the Metro, and
Hmm.
it's actually stunning to see. I mean, first of all, just the extreme details of people. They were without access to toilets or water
Oh,
in 22 degree Celsius heat. Really really hot heat. But the amazing thing about it was they all arrive early. They're all from here. They're talking about
yeah,
unmanned turnstiles that were closed by stewards at around 6:30 p.m. local time. I think the game doesn't begin for another 2.5 hours later.
yeah,
So
nine.
it wasn't this just like slow walk up, late walk up by Liverpool. It seems like there was just something drastically wrong with the situation of the stadium, which it's kind of weird to think this is a Champions League final venue. I think this is a venue that's hosted a Euros and a World Cup final. Does that surprise you? Just how catastrophic it is, or you think was there something else that kind of tipped you off this could happen?
I, I can't. I wouldn't say that. I don't think anyone was kind of expecting this, to be honest. Now, one thing that we can say is it wasn't just it wasn't just the beginning. It wasn't the preceding to the game. Apparently, there was a lot of bad stuff that happened afterwards. One of the a commentators that does a bunch of EPL games, Jim Beglin. He said it was one of the scariest moments of his life. Returning or leaving the stadium because apparently there's a bunch of bad activity. I guess it was poorly policed. Just outside, and apparently a lot of people were mugged.
Yeah,
And
I saw that actually before the game, and that was another thing I meant to bring up was that I saw that the other Liverpool fans were also reported being pickpocketed. Yeah, I wonder if there was something just overall low security status. And the other thing, Ben, is I was reading about this I think on Saturday, which is that there, and I meant to dig into this, but there has been some changes on who receives tickets to these games, and there almost seems to be I guess it's a neutral site, it's a neutral venue, it's a Champions game, Champions League final. So there's a lot of allocation for these VIP members, and it almost seems like there's just the staffing and the resources are just not there for the club's fans. It seems to be more prioritized for these VIP high dollar people.
interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when I think this is a good sign for a good note for people to have caution when you do see, the videos trickle in of Liverpool fans, opportunists, kind of jumping the fence. But you go back and look at that Hillsborough tragedy. It's the same thing, and what looks like opportunism is really just people put under really extreme conditions,
Yeah.
and also the idea of paying. I think even Carragher made this point. You pay thousands of dollars, and it's 5 minutes before game time, and you don't want to miss the game. So, I mean, I could even understand seeing that. So, yeah, just a really insane situation. Has there been any reports, Ben, about anybody being seriously hurt, or have you heard anything about that?
I didn't necessarily hear about that. I know a bunch of people. Well, I didn't say a bunch. I did see, some people saying, I've been missing a family member or whatever.
Jeez.
I don't know if that. I don't know if they were messing around or not. But just, I, I don't understand why you would have all those people trying to get through one queue. That needs to be explained by UEFA or I guess the people at the stadium. Um,
Yeah.
that just doesn't make sense, and it was only on the Liverpool side. That's also really bizarre. That doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, and we can move to the sporting thing, but sort of tying this in. Do you think? I mean, this was a big talking point before the game started. do you think that this may have affected the Liverpool performance, the Real Madrid performance? I mean, I guess
I wouldn't say that.
I guess again, you really can't say that because Liverpool, they lose the game, but actually they start off the game pretty well.
Yeah, yeah,
So let's get on to the game itself, and I think it's probably best to approach this probably by halves because it is kind of it is in some ways a game of two halves. I mean, Liverpool do dominate, I guess, both halves in some ways. I think the first half a little bit more, and then they're chasing, and it's kind of expected that Real Madrid's going to accept a little bit of pressure. But those first 15 minutes, it really looked like Liverpool could have gone ahead a few times.
yeah, yeah. In fact, there's a lot of things you can say about this game. There's a lot of criticism you can have for Liverpool players. But really, if not for Thibaut Courtois, Mane probably scores versus most goals. He has a brilliant shot that Courtois saves, and then Courtois also makes a ridiculous save on Salah. His first of two, really. So, but one thing I definitely saw was it was probably the best that Liverpool's front press had looked in some time. They were really they were able to turn Madrid over a lot. Modric and Cruz weren't able to influence at least that first part, the first 15 to 20 minutes. And one thing that kind of sucked was, at least from my perspective, is Liverpool weren't able to capitalize on that, and eventually Madrid were able to grow into the game. I don't think Benzema even had a touch in the final third until maybe after the first 20 minutes. But when he did, that was when Madrid finally looked a little dangerous. And then he had some moments. And so that really was kind of the beginning of it. It's just and Liverpool's kind of done that in a few big games. Really, you can think about back to the FA game, or maybe the both finals before that versus Chelsea, where Liverpool came out like a cannon. But because they weren't able to actually capitalize, eventually you kind of do allow teams to teams that set up to basically to defend first. That eventually over time that plays to their advantage, and you kind of saw that play out.
I mean, look at the XG for this game. It's clearly Liverpool's favor. You look at the XG for the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup. I mean, clearly in Liverpool's favor, but they don't get any goals here. And obviously, Courtois is amazing. But is it something that they're not? Is there a reason they're not capitalizing in those early stages? Is there anything you can think of other than just bad luck and poor finishing, or is it? I'm really grasping at straws here because it just seems so unfair because you can almost imagine a scenario where this game could have been, kind of like the way the City performance happened against Real Madrid. Of course, they did concede on the other end, but just you could see like a really fast start happening for Liverpool, 2 or 3 goals right there, and it didn't happen. Do you have any explanation why Liverpool just can't seem to find the back of the net?
Well, I think just regarding with Real Madrid, this was very fitting for their entire Champions League. You could say.
Yeah.
I feel like they were outplayed. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'd say like 85% of every game in the knockout round.
This is I would, this is the maybe this is the most remarkable I think final run we've probably seen in our lifetimes in some ways. I mean, you look at the number of teams that
the way they would have come back 2 goals in late versus PSG and City.
And the quality of teams. I mean, they knocked down all three of the Premier League top 3 teams. I mean, probably easily. If you consider the champions of Europe, Real Madrid, the best team in the world, which I don't. I think it's a knockout competition. It's a lot of luck. But I think that the 3 best teams in the world, probably on paper, are Chelsea, Liverpool, and City. And
Chelsea, they had a lot of faults this season, but they were the reigning European champions. So.
So you're right. I just want to cut. Yeah, I just want to say 85% is exactly right. It might be higher than that. The fact that they really they won this competition really in a few moments. But sorry. Go ahead, Ben. About Real Madrid.
You also asked me about the attack, like why maybe this kind of happened, and basically I want to say from like maybe March or February or March on, like the last quarter of the season, you did kind of see Liverpool's front attack kind of stall a little bit, and I do have some I guess points on that. I guess that I'll speculate on. They brought Diaz in. Diaz was definitely needed because they needed legs. But one thing that kind of did is Klopp ended up phasing out Jota, and in my opinion, Jota was the best finisher on the team, and I don't think over that that half of the season, you know, phasing him out and making him basically a bench player, that wasn't necessarily a net positive as much as people thought. He also ended up moving Mane to center forward. Now, in some cases, that really did work. You think
Hmm.
back to maybe that City that the FA final versus City, um, and Mane did have a couple really nice performances. But you kind of saw in this game his limitations to that. He doesn't necessarily have the best touch. He can't do the things that Firmino does in that false nine position. And one thing you called out, one thing you texted to me, and I think it's spot on, is in that first 30 minutes, you saw Diaz actually getting a chance to kind of get past Carvajal, but there was literally no one for him to square a ball to or do anything to. And so Carvajal was able to kind of track back, and because Mane was too far behind the play, there wasn't an actual striker in the box, and that was just like Mane was just kind of playing too far behind the play. I think that kind of showed up, and really, the elephant in the room that no one, well, I don't want to say no one wants to bring up, but just Salah didn't necessarily get hurt through this stretch. Until towards the end, he like tweaked something for Chelsea in that FA game, but his legs had to be shot. He was a different player coming back from African Cup of Nations, and I think that played a role too. So I think that would explain some of the attack. I also have some issues with the midfield that we can maybe get into. It's just
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where I think it's probably time to phase out Jordan Henderson, or maybe make him the backup number six to Firmino, and try to bring in another person on that right side that's as technically gifted as Thiago. Now that's not
Well,
necessarily easy to find, but that's what I would do.
yeah. Let's say I want to do want to compare the midfields for these two teams. I think that is a story in itself, and maybe in some ways underrated, overrated. I don't know. It'd be interesting to compare these two teams. Midfield, obviously, Real Madrid historic midfield with there with Modric, Cruz, and Casemiro. Um,
Yeah. Mhm.
the end. I mean, well, Liverpool obviously they don't score in the first half. Nobody scores in the first half. Liverpool get plenty of chances. Courtois with just incredible saves. And Liverpool's press, was really good. I mean, Konate probably winning so many first balls, and then Liverpool getting on those second balls and just getting the ball forward really quickly. But Real Madrid, I guess to their credit, were it's like they've been in this competition. They bend it, they bend it, but they don't break. I mean, the weird thing is when they do break, they also do score. So it's like the games where they did concede a lot of goals, they also did score a lot of goals. They're just a weird team,
Mhm.
and they almost scored at the end of the half, Ben. And
Yeah.
this was a huge. This is kind of a talking point, among everybody. And I think the halftime show, and I I thought this was going to stand. I really did. I've seen
I
this
did
given.
too.
I was telling you before this podcast. I've seen this given before. Even though I think I've always thought this is an offside call, just because it is a deflection going to a player in an offside position. Of course, my dad texted me and asked me why I was offside because there was still a player back there, and I made the point that it's. People always forget this, but once the goalkeeper goes ahead of the attacker, it's always the second to last man
Right.
for offside.
Yeah.
So suddenly you lose that second to last man because the goalkeeper's ahead of the ball. What did you? That would have been a terrible end of the half for Liverpool. Because for dominating so much, and the only time that Benzema really gets on the ball, really gets the better of Van Dijk. He kind of goes behind him, in between him and Robertson.
Mhm.
What were your thoughts on that offside call and the fact that Liverpool almost conceded it at halftime?
I was kind of with you. I thought it was going to be given as well. In fact, they even brought up one of the refs, I guess that was like that CBS has on the payroll, and she was kind of thinking the same thing. The only thing I can think of is maybe they just went with the call on the field. But
Yeah.
I really don't know, because like you said, like it seems like Fabinho is trying to make a play on the ball, regardless of it bouncing off or not. They said inadvertent. I think on the on the, like the commentators said inadvertent. So I guess we'll just go with that. As far as that, the psyche that this happened, I, regardless of them actually scoring or not, I think it was detrimental. To be honest, because one, Madrid sees the ball go in the net in a game that they've been
No.
thoroughly outplayed. So it sucks that it doesn't count, but you can just if Liverpool seemed invincible at that point, that there was a crack in the armor, I guess you could say. But two, before this, I even texted. I think Kanate is maybe the best player on the field at that moment because he
Yeah.
had been rock solid every minute until that. He did a play on Vinicius that was just absurd. He was just bullying people off the ball. He was calm on the ball. He was catching the ball like with his knee, like doing some juggles. He had everything. And then that moment between him and Allison really did kind of screw things up. So I don't know if maybe he came in to the second half a little rattled. I mean, it's not like he had a poor second half, but I
No.
I, I just think. Yeah, I just think that did kind of shake them a little bit, and it's not like they started the second half on fire either. So
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we'll never know how much that really mattered. I think probably the biggest thing is they just didn't score. I think I look back actually the game that's this kind of reminds me the most is in some ways Klopp's other Champions League final before Liverpool, which was the Bayern Dortmund game where Dortmund had such a dominant opening half, but you just felt that the fact that they just Liverpool's credit, their legs didn't tire too much. I think they did concede more of the ball in that opening phase in the second half because their legs were giving out a little bit. But
yeah, it's
I just
hard.
remember that. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, it's hard to keep that press
Yeah,
the entire time. And one thing you definitely saw towards at least in that second half, or maybe the latter stages of the first, is once Modric was able to get a few more touches and was able to turn a little bit. Cruz kind of the same way. And Casemiro had. I don't think Casemiro played a bad pass either. It was harder to get them to turn it over, and so basically it got to a point where the only time that Madrid was turning it over is when they tried to go long, and Trent was actually doing a really good job on Vinny, and for some reason they thought they thought this long ball over on Robinson's side was going to work, and Robinson, to his credit, like basically run every ball. It
yeah.
wasn't until they found Valverde that became an issue.
Yeah, and it is Valverde who gets that crucial ball into Vinicius Jr. taps it in. That the goal is so strange because so many different things happen during it. It's kind of a fluke in some ways. And of course, it's Courtois is man of the match for his goalkeeping performance. But you're looking at say Allison put a foot wrong. Of course, maybe the fact that offside goal had to be given, maybe that would have changed things. But who do you blame for that goal, Ben? I know Robertson always gets flack for the fact that he kind of switches off at times. It was really, I mean, to me, it was almost such a perfect ball. It was kind of harsh to blame him too much. I mean, he has the more dynamic player on his side in Vinicius. I think that Valverde, for obviously he's been an engine for Real Madrid, but he was kind of playing like a false winger role. He was kind of dropping into midfield a lot, dealing with pressure. So,
Well, I didn't actually. Yeah, well, I didn't really think about Robinson, but there's a ball that Carvajal plays to Casemiro that basically creates the goal, and that ball basically gets through two players that try to slide. And I think it's Thiago and Robertson, so that's the reason why Robinson's
yeah,
out of the play. But what that does is that does free out Valverde, and a lot of people online were trying to have a go at Van Dijk, but when you actually see is right as Van Dijk's trying to decide what to do with Valverde, Carvajal is making an overlap run. So if he tries to get close to Valverde and cut that off, you leave the overlap run, and he can do the same kind of ball. So it was just one of those times where, like you said, a lot of perfect things had to happen for Madrid to get that opportunity. And credit to Vinicius for just staying on side. That was probably the hardest part of the goal.
yeah. I think first glance I thought it was offside, but you watch it again, it really is a perfect ball. I think this kind of gets back now. I think to you mentioned earlier about the midfield, and I think Klopp's changes have to be seen kind of in light of how he started the game and in the decisions he made, both the attack and the midfield. So I think one thing to mention is we didn't say is Thiago started this game, which is a surprise. I think a lot of people didn't think he would be fit for this.
Yep.
And he plays a lot of minutes here. I just because of I think the game state, the fact that they're behind, and I think he's so crucial to that team. And maybe that's a weakness is that they're so reliant on a player like Thiago,
They are. Yep.
who's obviously made of glass and really sometimes can't go long in these games. But Klopp plays, puts in Jota, he brings in for Diaz, kind of goes back to, like you said, that front three that we like, and it's a bit more dynamic. I think Jota was all right. I think he was kind of still kind of playing over on the left, a little bit more of a withdrawn role. And I think it would have been nicer to see him in the box, but also I thought the services really, I think one thing to mention is I thought the services throughout this game, for the most part for Liverpool, was not very good.
It was,
Um,
yeah.
and then Henderson obviously comes off, Santiago comes off for Keita and Firmino. What did you think about, just kind of holistically, about what Klopp did with the starting lineup and these changes? I mean, did this all kind of work out for you? I mean, obviously it didn't work out because they didn't win the game, but do you think that this tango, these exchange of players could have been different?
So I didn't actually before this. I should have listened to the post game because a reporter probably would have asked us, and I would I would know more now. But I have a suspicion that because Tiago wasn't 100% like you were saying, I have a
Mm-hmm.
feeling that they went in with the idea that Naby would eventually come on for Tiago, and that's the reason why he didn't do the quote unquote NFT midfield. Because
Yeah.
if everyone was fit and good to go, I think that would have been the starting midfield, not with Henderson being on the bench. Because we saw that in the two finals versus Chelsea, and you needed another player on the right side that's technical with the ball. That Henderson just like loops balls up top.
It is it is so bizarre. I know you've criticized him for years, and I really haven't paid enough attention to it. But gosh, I mean, first, I really wanted to see this game go the distance, and I also wanted to see Liverpool win just because Madrid was all the time, and I hate Madrid. But yeah, the fact that he just loops balls so deep. I mean, there were several times where Courtois could just easily claim it because
Yep,
he's 6'7".
and you saw that. Yeah,
I just it's so bizarre to me that he hasn't fixed that in his game.
and it's because I mean, who are you aiming anything to? Like it's Courtois and or like Eder Militao. Like there's no one in the box. You don't have like an Origi in there. Henderson just kept doing that over and over again. Other than that, or which was even more mad is he'll do a sideways pass or try. He always goes for like the safe option. So he doesn't make mistakes, I guess you could say. But again, a verse like a boxed inside, you just need something a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, it showed up. Not even just Madrid. It showed up versus West Ham, and it showed up in the two Chelsea games. It's yeah, it's been a nagging issue, really for me all season. But
Well,
they've
you've
been
always
able
said
to overcome it.
and you said with Henderson, I think maybe this is right, is that he does seem to operate better in his later years, deeper, which is the
Right.
Fabinho role.
Yes.
But you're not. I mean, I guess you could make a case for maybe Fabinho could play a little bit higher, but he's just so good in that deep role. Um,
But
yeah. So
but the only
go
thing,
ahead.
the other thing I was thinking of is, I really do wonder what would have happened had Harvey Elliott not gotten that injury versus Leeds. Because
Yeah.
the two games prior, it's early in the season, so I don't know, but it's Burnley and Leeds. Harvey Elliott starts, and it's not Henderson.
Yeah.
Henderson's on the bench and healthy, and I feel like Harvey Elliott, after the injury, Klopp didn't necessarily trust him, even though he did play really well for Southampton towards the end. But I'm wondering if like that was maybe in the cards to actually phase out Henderson this season with someone like him, and the injury kind of set that back. But if not, and Elliott isn't necessarily the answer, I do think they need to address that and address that seriously this window.
Yeah, that is a big cause for concern. They've obviously spent a lot of resources on their front, and now the midfield maybe is an area. Their defense seems to be pretty all right. I mean, Konate, like you mentioned, was just such an incredible player this game. So obviously, let's just get quickly to the end of the game. Just touch on it a few points here. Mane, I think had a few more chances, but Salah really, we talked about him kind of having a quiet game, but he did have almost, he almost had his moment.
Moment
You know,
of magic.
he almost had his moment of magic. It's that incredible. I think you mentioned this before. It is a messy thing because it's like it's kind of like they don't have a right foot in some ways, but they can really slow start, quickly speed up the ball and then just kind of flick it with their right foot.
Or just
Not with a lot of power, but
the first touch he has. Messi
it's
scored a goal.
insane.
Messi scored a goal. I think it was versus Nigeria in the World Cup, where he takes the first touch
Very
that was
similar.
very
Yes.
similar to that. That's
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of.
Well, and the fact that Courtois gets down, I mean, that's the amazing thing about Courtois this game is he's so tall and he's still able to get down so low. I mean,
Sucks.
that shot by Salah, it's not on the ground, but it's still extremely low. So, and I think Courtois even before that he had to go from one post to the other. There was a header back across the goal where I think Salah basically would have put it in. Had Courtois not sprinted all the way across the goal and stuck his leg out. So I mean,
yeah, and well, that's one thing where I feel like if Salah dives with his right foot, because he tries to do something cheeky with his left, I don't even think he's going for goal. I think he's trying to pass it to someone.
score it again. Yeah,
I think he actually gets that in. So like, maybe he had that in the back of mind because I haven't seen him do anything with his right foot for well over a month. I think he had a cross to Origi versus Everton, but he's been very hesitant to go back to his right foot. And the best moments of him all season, I think back to that City goal, and he had a similar goal versus Watford the week after that, where he started using his right foot more, and like that. If he actually gets comfortable and when he can, I'm not saying he has to be a 2-footed player, but if he can add that threat to his game, I do think he'll have a claim to being the best player in the world. But he's become predictable by being so reliant on the left. But
I agree. And that takes us pretty much to the end of the game. I think Liverpool had a few chances there down the final few minutes, but it actually didn't really seem. It almost seemed anticlimactic. There was a few turnovers there. I think Madrid got a quarter or two, which kind of deflated the Liverpool attack. I think Keita had a foul.
There was either a free kick or like a cross sent in, and it wasn't Henderson, so we'll give him credit here at least. But like you said, it was just looped in, and Courtois just caught it, and it might have been Trent. And,
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I thought that if Liverpool, I thought one of their biggest chances would be just to get the ball on a set piece, but it seemed like Real Madrid were actually pretty adept, both with Courtois' height and also the fact that
Militao was amazing. Yeah,
and Casemiro once again, really an underrated player in terms of defensive ability. Let's quickly one more thing in Courtois because I think you could probably make a short list here. I don't know where you start, but there's probably a Casillas performance. There's probably Neuer and I don't know. I don't know much about Champions League history, but really, this is probably the best Champions League goalkeeping performance of her lifetime, at least as far as I can remember.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm kind of with you. I don't necessarily. I can't do the history book. At least in recent memory, you could say. I mean, Mendy, I guess had a couple. I think Mendy had a couple of good saves last year. Neuer, I remember it was one of the first episodes we did with the podcast. Remember we talked him up a lot. But I don't think the chances were this good. Like you said, the way he was able to get down. So yeah, we'll give it to that. We'll give it to him, and it doesn't come out of nowhere. To be fair to him, I think I put this in the script that he did win goalkeeper of the World Cup in 2018. So he's
had a performance of the ages versus Brazil. It kind of reminded me of this one. It was just looked like nothing could beat him. I think Firmino did score on him though, which is funny. He's so funny because you look back. I mean, it's not that long ago when he came to Madrid. It was. I mean, he's not phenomenal with the ball at his feet. And that was probably the one area that
used to be a big liability. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you look at that Man City Champions League game a few years ago.
Right, that's what I was going to. Mm-hmm.
But he's just, for his freakish size and the fact that that shot in the first half, the ball off the post that he hits at Mane, I don't think anybody else in the world gets it just because of his length and his shot stopping ability. I don't think you put a single keeper up there that would have gotten that. So obviously well deserving for him. I think it looked like it meant a lot to him. I think he felt like he had been written off in some ways. So credit to him. We haven't really talked enough about Madrid, but I mean, this is their. The funny thing about this was Ronaldo had joined this 5 club in 2018. It was like, seen as this amazing thing, and then all of a sudden, it's like all these Madrid players 2 days ago just graduated that club. Like 7 or 8 of them. Marcelo did play. Tony Cruz, Modric, Carvajal, who I think we forget is now part of that 5 Champions League club. Cruz is kind of funny. Cruz is kind of funny because he's not part of that 2013-14 team, but he did one with Bayern that 2012 year or whatever it was against Dortmund. So, I mean, we talk about the luck with Madrid, but they just seem to show up in these things, you know?
I think what's really impressive is how they were able to just rebound losing Ronaldo. Um, I was kind
Yeah,
of I was kind of thinking they were maybe in trouble. Like they had made some sales. You remember we can talk about Varane. They made a bunch of deals to get players off their books to afford Mbappe because Mbappe was going to be their future. And yet, out of nowhere, at least this season, all of the scouting that they had done over the last few years really came really showed up for them. I'm thinking of Vinny Jr., who I think he only had 3 goals his all of last season. For him being 20 or
we,
21,
we, we were we were talking about him as a disappointment. We were
a little
saying,
bit.
where is
Yeah, we just thought
this
he was a
player
speed
that we
demon.
thought he was going to take a leap? Yeah,
And not only did he add a bunch of goals through his game, I think he's maybe the assist leader for La Liga. So it's he's everyone knows about Benzema, but Vinny was just as important to that Madrid side as well. So it's kind of fitting that he gets the goal for this. But the only reason they're even in this thing is because of Rodrigo. Rodrigo was
yeah.
was kind of the same thing. I was thinking maybe he was going to be a bust, and he gets those 2 goals versus City in under 5 minutes to even get them in this game. And you look behind them. It seems they won't really have an issue with losing maybe Tony Cruz. You have Camavinga that can either play as a 6 or maybe as an 8. It seems they've been able to play Camavinga and Casemiro together without issue. I do, and Valverde that he played as a right wing, and it's his assist that wins them the game. But a lot of Madrid fans think he can be an 8 midfielder as well. And I don't. Now the only issue is I don't necessarily know how Cruz. I mean not Cruz. Modric can go as far,
It doesn't, but
but
are we living in a new age, Ben? I wonder if it's like the Tom Brady, now taking, he's going back to the Buccaneers, winning Super Bowls in his 40s, multiple Super Bowls in his 40s. Are we now living in an era where footballers are? I mean, Ibrahimovic, Ronaldo. Are we living where footballers are just going to go longer, and we're just going to have to not be surprised at these things?
well, in a weird way, Ancelotti's maybe perfect for him. Because you kind of Andrew kind of noticed this too. It was such a different. It was so different watching the two teams because one team was pressing and chasing the
Yeah.
ball basically, and the other team just wasn't. And just like what Modric offers is he's like press resistant to the point. It's almost if he can get the ball in turn, you can't turn him over. And not
No.
only that, he can create some space for himself and find teammates. And it's just those players are so important these days. You don't necessarily have to be huge and athletic, but you do have to be able to beat a press, and not a lot of people. Even in modern football, struggle with that. So
On that, Ben, actually, I do want to, I guess, toss this to you real quick, and maybe I'll answer it myself in a second. I mean, I think maybe already he was in this conversation, but is he the best midfielder of the last 30 years?
I'm probably not good enough to answer, but I can't think of anyone else.
I
Maybe
mean,
maybe like Xavi. Like, are you trying to go like that way or
well,
Pirlo?
I think he's kind of. I hate to say this as a Barcelona, as a Xavi fan, but I mean and obviously Xavi. There was a point I think where Xavi dominated games in a way that I don't even think Modric did, just because the style of Barcelona. But you look at the different types of teams that Modric has been in. I go back to that 2013-14 team, and he played like a really different role. It was kind of like that midfield was really bizarre. It was Xabi Alonso, Modric, and Di Maria, and it was like Modric had to do so much work, and I think that's a really underrated Modric season. And then he's on this team, and he's doing a very different job. And I mean, he took Croatia to. He took a country that. I mean, is Virginia? Does Virginia have higher population than Croatia? I mean, I don't even know.
What is it, like
But
13 million?
so I think you almost have to if you're skipping over Xavi, if you're
Well,
skipping over Iniesta, which I think you do. I think the only person you come up with is actually his former manager, Zinedine Zidane. I mean, a very different midfielder, but that's probably the next midfielder you get to. He skips over Pirlo. I think Pirlo's got a World Cup, but he doesn't have the Champions League resume and the longevity. So I think Modric is probably the best midfielder of the last 30 years.
I mean, one thing you can also say to him is he's the only player in the Messi Ronaldo era to, I think, win a Ballon d'Or. Like they basically
Yeah,
they went like what 10 or 11 years in a row, and it's like it was only him that was able to break that. So
it yeah, it's just it's incredible to think that looking back when he won that Ballon d'Or a few years ago, I remember he had that really bad start of the season. He wasn't fit for a lot of
I
games,
thought
and
I
I
thought his
thought
legs were dead.
I thought he was, and I thought that was it. I thought Luka Modric would probably retire at this point.
Hmm.
Maybe he would go somewhere off to China. Look at Iniesta off to Japan, Qatar. Again, we're talking about Xavi and Iniesta there, and instead he's playing for Real Madrid at 36, and will probably be there at 37 and 38. Um, the Ancelotti piece is really interesting here, Ben. I like that you mentioned that because I think both of us were kind of skeptical of him coming in there. I think we both did like a preseason talk, and we actually picked Barcelona to win the La Liga title,
Oh no!
assuming
Oh no, we did.
asterisk heavy asterisk there. We thought Messi was staying, but it might not even mattered. I mean, what do you think is just so good about him? He's known obviously as a player's manager. I think he does. He's not known in some ways as a great tactician. Like you watch those like YouTube videos where it's like YouTube masterclass, and it's like Klopp over a chessboard and like showing where he put pieces. And you just like can't picture that with Ancelotti. It's more just like a smirk and a smile and good job, boy. But he's got some magic, and he's clearly got some tactical acumen. He's won Champions League with all these clubs.
Yeah.
What do you think he brings as this Real Madrid team that I don't think that even I don't know even Zidane towards the end of his reign wasn't getting out. Scolari obviously wasn't when he was there a few years ago. What do you think is missed by Ancelotti by people that kind of doubt him, ourselves included, I guess?
Um, it's kind of hard to say, as far as like I'm trying to think of like maybe what was different between the way that um Ancelotti set up as opposed to Zidane when they played Liverpool just last season. Because Real Madrid they didn't just beat Liverpool in 2018. They knocked them out of the Champions League just last season. Um,
Yeah,
one thing I feel like Zidane was kind of being cute between like playing a back three here and there. Um, but I don't necessarily remember Zidane like trusting. Well, one thing he played Modric, Cruz, and Casemiro for every single game.
yeah,
There's at least been some kind of interchange with Camavinga and Valverde a little bit more this season. So I guess you could say that. Um, but as far as just the manager himself, it's I can't just say it's unique. He's the only one to win basically every major league
yeah.
in Europe. Like no one else has done that. So his football transcends, and not just that, he's pretty good in finals. I mean, didn't he win three with AC Milan like in the earlier stages or two?
I think he only won the one. Did he? Well, let's see. He lost the one against Liverpool. He lost the epic comeback, and then he won the following 2 years later.
Was he the one? Was he in 2007?
Yeah, 2007.
Okay,
I feel like I'm missing one here, but I I,
and then he
I
won
think
it.
he might just
And he won
I
earlier
think he
with
might just have three or
he won,
four.
won earlier with Madrid. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It's almost tough to put a finger on what makes him so great, and I
Well,
think that
it's just weird. Sorry, I just kind of got in. It's just
go
weird.
ahead.
It's just weird to watch what he did at Napoli and Everton, and then to turn around and do this again. Because that's kind of what I was feeling like maybe he was done because I just seen it not work. at two clubs,
But
but it's just the level, I guess, of player. With it being better, I guess suits how he likes to play.
yeah, I think there's like this weird asymmetry where I think that sometimes being tactically astute suits. I'm not saying Ancelotti's tactically astute, but I'm just saying that's very tactically rigid, very tactically. Your style is very much a Klopp or a Tuchel. They're bad examples, but say it almost that could maybe fit a smaller club where you're trying to eke out things and trying to find a way. And you're in Ancelotti's style, which is so much relying on the player. If
Mm.
your caliber of player isn't very good, I just don't think that can get across very easily and bring those players up a level. And I'm being very vague here, but it is amazing just how much he has surprised me this season and
Yeah.
how good this team has performed. And it seems like the players genuinely do. I mean, that was the amazing thing about the celebration after the game. Is it seems like the players really, really do love him.
Hmm.
I saw some images of him on the bus not just a few minutes ago before this podcast, and it was like he was hugging the players. He was actually he did this funny thing where he tapped Kareem Benzema on the wrong shoulder. Benzema looked to one shoulder, thought he was there, and then he came up the other side and gave him a hug.
Oh
It's just
God.
like fun, avuncular, granddad, uncle things that you just, I don't know, make them great.
Mm.
We're going long in this game, so let me kind of just speed up one quick point, Ben, just for the Liverpool I want to touch on because obviously, hats off Madrid. I guess deserved winners. The fact that they just had the craziest campaign. Maybe we've seen it in our lifetimes in some ways,
Well,
but
one thing I'll say is, looking at the stats, Liverpool didn't play. I don't even think City did this. Liverpool didn't play many teams that were able to get more than 500 passes against them, and that's what Madrid did yesterday. Yesterday as well. So they weren't just
yeah,
they were actually they were defensive minded and sitting deep, but they were also playing football in between that too.
well, they have a weird kind of like um, conservatism, but it's not like a Mourinho or like they sit like you said they sit a bit deeper, but they actually like pass in that first line really well. It's actually one thing I've always admired about Madrid is that they because Kroos and Modric both can drop so deep, kind
Yes.
of in those half spaces, kind of between allow the fullbacks to push a little bit higher, and they kind of plug into those spaces. It's really hard to press them on that first line or like first or second line. They don't take a lot of chances in some ways. I think you mentioned that earlier about Modric, which is that like you're not getting the ball off him in that situation. I think Kroos is the same thing, where it's like if you try to press him, he's just gonna kind of like hold it for an extra second and then like pass it back off to a center back and then it restarts.
Yep.
So I think for teams like Liverpool, for Chelsea, for Man City, that can be a little bit frustrating because you're not winning the ball super high up. Like you're winning the ball because they don't do a great job getting it to their forwards because they
Yes.
just can't because the midfielders are so deep. But you're not winning the you're not. I mean, Liverpool has scored so many goals by turning the ball over from center backs, from deep midfielders, from fullbacks, and I just don't think Madrid did. They don't beat themselves up in that way, and that kind of gets to the point, Ben. Maybe about I want to touch on about Liverpool before we go on to something else, which is that this is another final that Klopp lost. Of course, he won against Tottenham in 2018. Although you could probably play a little bit of a scenario if they don't get that early goal in that game. Does it turn out like this game? But that's neither here nor there. It's probably a little bit of a
Well,
sliding doors moment.
maybe not necessarily the PK, but it is kind of interesting how it's not just the solid PK. There's a guy that scores a second goal that's really kind of the crucial thing
Origi.
because right before that, either it's not Modric, Christian Eriksen. I think it's a post. Like Spurs were kind of getting close, and this
And Allison had some fantastic saves as well.
Liverpool get that second. I think in like it's sometime in the 80th minute where Spurs still could have had time, and it's
Origi,
Origi,
yeah,
right? And Origi is just the one like he's almost like not a Klopp player, but
yeah,
he's just a striker that, and we saw what he did versus Barcelona. It's similar to what Pep and Man City have had, where sometimes maybe not having a player that a manager like loves for their style. That's almost like the antithesis of it. That's when they become successful. And it's like one thing that really sucked was it. I kind of feel like maybe if he would have been able to bring Origi on in that 75th minute and do that, and because he did bring on four attackers, he just did Jota and Firmino.
Yeah.
Maybe some of those crosses would have changed because Origi's got that height and he's good at attacking balls. But anyways,
Yeah. I was surprised to see him not brought in there. I thought that
oh,
that would have been a
he was hurt.
yeah. Well, there you go. Okay. There because you would have been surprised too. But anyway, another final loss by Klopp. It's probably a bit harsh again because you look at the underlying stats and the fact that I think both of us could see a situation where Liverpool won this game pretty comfortably yesterday or 2 days ago, excuse me. But is there something about Klopp's style that doesn't suit finals? Is it something? I mean, I think you joked with me. Like I usually hate finals because they have this like weird feeling to them. They don't really feel like a regular like season game. They almost seem to favor. I mean, they for all sense and purposes, they seem to favor a Mourinho or and even Ancelotti,
Yeah.
somebody who doesn't take a lot of chances, who kind of trusts the veteran players a little bit more and says like, you guys kind of figure it out, but don't beat yourselves. And it seems like that's not Klopp's style. It's he wants to still play heavy metal. He still wants to play in the front foot, and it's so unfortunate because I think a victory here, I think early goals here, I think would have really challenged that narrative, which may not be entirely right, but is it? I mean, I'll toss it to you. Do you feel something very similar about Klopp's style? Is there something that he needs to maybe think about in the future? Because I can't imagine this will be the last Champions League final that Liverpool plays in under him.
It depends because when you think of you kind of mentioned it with the heavy metal football. His thing is really pressing and chasing the game and trying to win the ball higher upfield. And against a team like Madrid, who have the two midfielders that you mentioned, unless Madrid actually do make a mistake, they're not going to necessarily beat yourselves. So at that point, you actually have to find a way to actually break a team down. And it I don't think this is necessarily Klopp specifically, but just the way the team makeup is he doesn't necessarily have them other than Thiago. He doesn't really have a midfield that's really great at just playing a good like I don't know eight to 10 yard or 12 yard pass, progressive pass on the ground, or advancing the ball 20 yards upfield
Yeah.
without losing it. Like that's what was sorely missing. And Thiago can't just do everything by himself. So I don't necessarily think that just Klopp wants to not have technically gifted midfielders. I don't buy that. So if you just fix that, I think his style would be fine. Klopp also likes playing with the high fullbacks. I don't necessarily think the goal happens because Trent and Robertson are playing high. I mean, Robertson goes to ground. That's the reason why Valverde is free. It's not because Robertson's high upfield. So I don't necessarily buy that either. And what's kind of funny is I kind of talked about this with Rex, over the midweek, is the way that he likes playing with this high line and the way that VAR's like implemented. It almost suits Liverpool to play this way because they so. Another
Yeah.
another reason why they win the ball back a lot, like you mentioned, Van Dijk and Kanate are basically standing at the midway line, all game. So sure, you can get an easy ball kicked over the top, but you have to be within a millimeter of being on sides. That VAR
You have to be a millimeter on side, and you have to beat Kanate or Van Dijk in a foot race. And it,
right,
it seems like there's like two players in the world going to do that, and one's Mbappe and the other one's Holland. Well, there you go.
and as
But
and as aggressive as Liverpool have been in all these finals, they're also really hard to actually score against. So I think his football is fine. Just the issue is just not necessarily having attackers taking the chances when they get them. Unfortunately,
yeah,
or going against a really good keeper, which happened at least in this game. I won't necessarily say that was the case in 2018 with or 2019 with Louise. But anyways,
yeah. Champions League final. Any last thoughts, Ben, on the Champions League final? Anything we missed? Anything about Klopp, Real Madrid, Modric, Benzema? Anything?
I mean, what's funny is I kind of mentioned it about with Mbappe that it's very funny how we kind of talked about this last week. You assume they were bringing Mbappe on to be on that left side, and
Yeah.
that's the guy that ends up winning the damn thing for him. And that's a shame. Um, I mean, Madrid look fine. They're heavily linked to Tchouaméni. If you read the reports, it seems like Liverpool missed out on him, which really would have sucked. He would have been absolutely perfect. It's possible that Liverpool could maybe, I don't want to say a rebuild, but they could be losing Mane, Firmino. Firmino they might just run out his contract, but if they're going to sell, they need to sell him. Salah's situation isn't necessarily pinned down yet. So there could be some changes there. You know, you're already bringing Carvalho in, Fabio Carvalho, but I don't, you know, for him being I think he's like 20 now. For being so young, you don't necessarily know what he's going to offer. But you could see some changes here and there. I do think they need to look at that, specifically that right-sided midfield. And if Keita's not going to be it, you know, maybe find someone to be able to give Thiago some rest, because like you said, when he misses games, it shows. It shows a lot.
Yeah, I think Klopp has sometimes maybe erred a bit too on the side of just physicality in that midfield, and I think that's probably a little bit unfair, because I know that he's trying to stuff some talent and talented technical players in the midfield, but I feel like
I can't say negative things about Henderson without the ball. He's maybe
phenomenal. Yes.
Yeah, maybe as good as there is right now without the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's quickly, before we get out of here, Ben, I saw that you wanted to just to quickly touch on the Forest promotion, and I think it's maybe I don't Forest's heyday is way before I think either of us were born. I've seen maybe one or two films or documentaries on them, and I still couldn't even tell you much more about Brian Clough. But I guess, you know, it was between them and Huddersfield. It looks like Huddersfield actually had some decent shouts for PKs there. I'm surprised that VAR didn't give it. But it looks like the teams going up now are now penciled in, penned in. Fulham, Bournemouth, we've seen those two before, and then Nottingham Forest. Are you looking forward to Forest? Are you looking forward to Fulham? Are you looking forward to Bournemouth? Or just does the Forest, the fact that this is a team that hasn't been up there in a while, it gives us something different other than those yo-yo clubs. Does that excite you?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Forest. You know, I kind of mentioned how, you know, it's similar to kind of Brentford last year. It's just someone new, or at least new for us. So that's pretty exciting. But also, you know, the type of football they play, you know, assuming they can keep most of their players, was pretty exciting. I mean, they thrashed Leicester in the FA Cup. I think like 4-1.
4-0.
Okay.
Yeah.
They went through Arsenal, beat them. You know, they have they have that guy Brendan Aronson, who looks
Johnson.
Brendan Johnson. Sorry, we like Brendan Aronson too.
He'll be going against them.
And well, there you go. They have that Spitz guy.
Spence, yeah,
plays right back. He's been pretty exciting. You know, they gave Liverpool a pretty darn good game. To be honest, Jota, I think Liverpool only won that game 1-0, and it was because of a very close call with Jota. Like people think there was maybe even a foul or something. Yeah, no, I think it's great. Great to see them get through. I watched Huddersfield play their first game, and I wasn't necessarily that impressed. So just from an entertainment standpoint, it's you know, I obviously want to watch good football when it's on. So I think they'll offer that.
Yeah, and you mentioned all those talented young players they have. I think one or two of them are on loan. But the thing is, also, I was listening to I was reading some Forest fans, and one of the things they kept saying is, yes, obviously we would give anything to be promoted, but we really just love this team. We love Steve Cooper, came from Swansea, also lost. It's kind of like Thomas Frank. He lost the final last year, and then went to this year. Thomas Frank loses the final the other year against Fulham, and then wins it the next year. So it's kind of a nice little symmetry there. But they said we really want to keep this team together. We love these players, and I think the only way they really could have done it is getting a promotion, because you get that surge of money, you get that the newfound recognition, and I think that maybe players like Brendan Johnson. They've got some good center backs as well. I think that gives them a good chance to hold on to them, because they're going to want to stay up. And this kind of gets me to a point, Ben, that I've been floating around a little bit, but I wonder if I'm going a little bit overboard with this, which is that with Burnley going down, with Watford going down, with Norwich, you know, having their 1 year where they're not in the Premier League, this is probably the strongest Premier League we've had. I think the only other year, I just think of the quality of the promoted teams. I mean, Fulham was just unbelievable this season. Now they're a bunch of other people's toys as well, and they're losing Carvalho, and I think it remains to be seen what Mitrovic is going to show up on this level. But Bournemouth is also a very good team. They've actually spent a ton of money on their players. I mean, I'm trying to think of the player that they had, the Liverpool player they have, not Harvey Elliott, but
Bournemouth. Is it Harry Wilson?
Wilson. $15 million on a championship player. I mean, they've spent money, So they've spent Premier League money on their players, and Solanke. So they have a strong
Solanke.
So these are really talented teams, and I think the only other year that compares just in terms of the talent that's in the Premier League and that's coming to the Premier League is honestly probably 1920 when Sheffield United, Leeds came up, and I think that was also Norwich, but they went down. But I think that was probably the other year where you had a really, really strong, 1 to 19 level. Does it kind of feel that way to you, or do you think that there are any teams that kind of, maybe it's a team going up, or maybe it's a team that should be going down? Does it seem like this is probably A, does it seem like this is the strongest the league's been in a while? B, do you think that there's a team that I'm missing that's probably going to be a Burnley this next season?
That's a really good question. I mean,
I cooked that on the spot, so you're going to have to.
For the last few years, every August it was pretty easy for me to say Palace and Burnley. Roy Hodgson's Palace, not necessarily Vieira's. I guess maybe the top picks for relegation or betting odds, maybe people would be down in Southampton if they lose like Bruges, but they can play good football here and there. I guess maybe Leeds with Marsh. They're very. I mean, it's not necessarily boring. So it's. You maybe could say you could say. I mean, we saw the relegation race. It dwindled down to a few teams, but you weren't secure until Brentford basically got 40 points. So you thought maybe there were 6 teams going into the last 3 weeks. I don't see any reason to think it wouldn't be the same. So
and Burnley aside, they were actually pretty good teams. I mean, Leeds beat City. Maybe not last season, but they gave City good games. They you look at Everton. I mean, they've knocked off teams like Chelsea. I mean, they're really, really strong teams that were on the bottom of the table. So I mean, look from a Brentford perspective, I am worried. I think that obviously 13th is amazing, and I think that there's a sense that we can only go up, especially if we keep Christian Eriksen and maybe we bring in another other of his colleagues at Denmark. But it's going to be tough. I think these promoted teams, maybe Forest is going to be a bit weak, but I think Fulham and Bournemouth, I think they understand what it's like a little bit more than Watford and Norwich. I think they're a little bit more battle tested. I think they're going to be a little bit more, maybe not so much Leeds, but a little bit more Brentford than they're going to be Norwich. So
both Bournemouth and Fulham. I mean, Fulham definitely has a long history in the league. I mean, but Bournemouth under Eddie Howe was good for maybe 5 years, and just a bunch of injuries ended up getting to them. But I do think you're right. Like the owners or whatever take things maybe more seriously than like Watford and Norwich. They aren't necessarily, these aren't yo-yo clubs that you imagine. And maybe another thing you could say, I don't necessarily know who their loanies are, so that could maybe change things. But I don't know about you, but when I really started following the league and started seeing some of these guys being promoted, it was like older teams. It seems everyone's kind of youthful these days too, which help with a league that's become more about intensity and physicality, not just technique. So
that is a great shot. The championship, when I started following it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there still kind of was that legacy. You still had those, and in fact, those were kind of the teams that Brentford seemed to lose to, which was teams with really solid 4-4-2s, experienced center backs that could bully Ollie Watkins or whoever. And it does seem that the league is kind of in some way, it's being a testing ground for the Premier League's top academies. The Man Cities, the Arsenals, like those are the players that are actually in some ways affecting who goes up in the league a lot of the times. Yeah. And two, it just seems like English football quality in general is just. I mean, you've mentioned this before. It's just you look at the comparison even between La Liga, obviously La Liga once again champions of Europe, but the style of the games in the Premier League are actually in some ways better. The passing's better, the pressing's better. It's I've seen numerous comments from players that have moved from England to Spain and vice versa, and just talk about the difference in just the intensity, just the speed, and how much they've been impressed with the English game. So,
And it just seems every team these days tries, or at least tries to play from out of the back, tries to actually keep possession. It's not just boot it upfield and hoof it and try to, like you said that the 4-4-2. Things have kind of changed a little bit.
anything else we've missed, Ben? Anything else that's been on your mind that we can call it, or is there anything that you've this last week that's kind of been floating in your head? Transfers, I don't know, old games you've watched, however you want to call it.
I mean, Rex asked me something last week. Basically, like, how would I feel if Liverpool did go on to lose this? Would I like look at the season differently? It was easier to say that when it was just a hypothetical. Um, but I don't know. Like looking back, I don't necessarily want to go into too personal, but haven't necessarily had the best. Everyone's kind of had issues with COVID and whatnot. It's been really great to follow this team because it's been an escape. One thing I've kind of I made the mistake about. I think like when they won in 2019 was I just cared about the final. This
Yeah,
I tried to kind of, or I think it was when they missed the out to City with like 1 point or whatever, or like when they lost the first one to Madrid. I just cared about the
yeah.
result. I've tried to enjoy the moment a little bit more, and so they've given me so many good moments that I'm still gonna say I enjoyed the season, and it they didn't necessarily get this one, but it was good to see Klopp at least come away with two trophies, because that has been kind of the knock against him. So it is something to hopefully to build on. It's like I mentioned before that maybe stories that it might be Mane's last game, so there could be some reshuffling that way, and there is kind of a worry in the back of my mind that uh, football is ultimately about cycles. I mean, I guess you could say this with like most sports. Um,
Hmm.
but and it's possible they've had a 5-year cycle, and maybe it's not necessarily going to be easy to start a new one without suffering some setbacks, especially when you don't have oil owners to make a dig. But the fact that Klopp also extended this year, and the fact that it was last year was a real down period. You lost Van Dijk to injury, injuries at the back everywhere. They were playing, Nat Phillips and Reese Williams at center back, Fabinho at center back in some of those games. And actually, there was one game they played Fabinho and Henderson at center back.
I mean,
Uh,
amazing, and they were having to really dig deep in the January window to find, like you said, to find center backs.
and oh yeah, Ozan Kozbak, who went to Norwich and like couldn't get a game. Uh, it's so much better than it was last year, and
That's good perspective.
it starts with Allison having a header just to get in the Champions League, and so just to go from that to and, they lost to Madrid by to 1 goal. It's not like they were outplayed. Yeah, like you said, it's important to keep perspective, so I'll do that.
I love that. That's a nice touch to keep
Ah,
perspective. I'm glad that you could look back on this season and not just let one unlucky, unfortunate final, but also a game that Liverpool played well in,
mm,
uh, affect the entire season. Well, the last thing I was going to say also is that, yeah, I wouldn't get your hopes too much down. I think the fact that Klopp did extend things, obviously City deep pockets, PSG deep pockets,
yeah.
they're probably not going anywhere, if not even further up, and then maybe these point tallies are going to get even higher. But the Champions League is still kind of a roll of the dice, and I think that no matter how much money PSG and City spend, I think that managers like Klopp and Ancelotti probably are still going to be around to take the spoils. So, any plugs or shout outs? Been anything non Liverpool related that you've been thinking about or whatever?
I was thinking of doing a Super League kind of dig, but I'll,
Good
I'll,
luck with that now.
I'll just hint at that. But it is kind of bittersweet that the team that or the club that tried to do the Super League is the one that's actually lifting it this year. And actually, one thing I was thinking about when you asked me about, well, why did the offsides happen? I was like, oh, because Juve, but Madrid tried to do the Super League, and UEFA was getting them back. But I'm not going to say that.
That's pretty good. Yeah, it was kind of funny to see Perez up there and with all the cronies, and yeah, I would have loved to see them lose, but Liverpool was also part of that Super League angle, so
Didn't start it, but yeah, fair point.
yeah. And shout out for me is really, I guess you guys probably touched on this midweek, but Jose Mourinho did win another trophy. It is amazing that he does seem to do well in finals, and this seems to be a theme we've talked about, is that these managers, there is a know-how to win these kind of games. So I guess hat tip to him, even though I can't stand his football. All right, Ben, I think that does it. We actually covered this game pretty extensively, more than I thought we would. So what'd you say?
I said solid.
Solid, yeah, and maybe we can. I think next week would be a great week to recount the Premier League, because I think one thing I've been thinking about is maybe even trying to give some grades for these teams, because I think they might have a lot of contention about which teams deserve an A, which teams deserve a B, and really just a D, an E, an F, not an E. It's not E's and grades, whatever. But I think that it might just depend on your perspective. I think we all will probably give the same grade for Manchester United and Brentford, but we'll see. All right, we'll just end it here. Nobody has to say you stay squatty. We'll just say I just said it. You stay squatty.
All right,
So
well,
all right, peace.
All right, and
Have a go, Ben.
and I'll stop recording.